Hello, Janksters, and welcome to another edition of the MagicJank podcast, the weekly show where members of Team MagicJank get together and we talk about the latest happenings in Magic the Gathering. And as you can imagine, we are right on schedule to do just a big spoiler talk because Duskmourn, we are in the throes of spoiler season, and we got a relatively small crew. My name is Graham, go by Hamax42, and I'm joined by Carlo C. Ferverdo_Jr. How are we doing, man?
Hey, what's up, everybody? I'm excited to talk about some new Duskmourn cards. Considering we're just literally, what's today, the 8th? We're 10 days away from the streamer event, which means we are 12 days away from pre-release weekend.
Right? It's exciting.
Yeah.
It's coming up. Yeah, and we're going to be talking about, the January set before too long, or looking forward to Foundations. But for right now, it's all about Duskmourn. So I'm excited. I don't know about you, but I feel like it's funny, like I feel like we settled into Bloomborough and it's like, oh, it's nice here. Now jump scare. So here we are. But it's going to be fun. I'm looking forward to it. So before we dive into the previews, I mean, is there anything that you've got coming up that you want to tell the people about, or anything fun that's been happening since we chatted last?
Anything fun? I mean, we just had the MTGO Creator Showdown that was this past weekend.
Right.
I died at 2-2 because it's a double elimination, 6-round events. Once you get the second loss, you're done, you're out. So that was pretty fun. That was standard. I got to play against 3 different builds of Golgari midrange and 1 Dimir midrange build. So the Black X midrange decks were very prevalent in that tournament. The winner, Todd Anderson, was actually on Jeskai Convoke, and I think was only maybe he and one other person was playing that build of Convoke. So, but yeah, lots of great games over on Magic Online. Next month's Creator Showdown will be Dual Commander, which, I mean, I play Commander. My understanding is Dual Commander has like a slightly different ban list. But you can bet I'm bringing my Planeswalker deck to that event.
Oh,
so
heck yeah. I mean, of course. Yeah.
Because why not?
Yeah. I love it. That's fantastic. So 2-2, not bad, like not obviously not the result you want, but I gotta ask, those 2 wins that you got, were there any notable inclusions in those?
Yeah, listen, round 1, I got to play against Reed Duke. And
so clearly, I mean, in losing to Reed Duke, there's no shame in that. Like, it's all good. Like, we understand. So
yeah, well, round 1, I won.
Wait, what?
And I won round 1.
Hall of Fame Pro Tour champion Reed Duke. You actually managed to take him down? Congratulations.
It was
That's
so
awesome.
so interesting because I had literally said on stream all week. I said, guys, I have this tournament coming up. I see Reed Duke is in the tournament. That's the one person I don't want to get paired against. There's other pros. There's other very much professional Magic players as a part of the Creator Showdown, and the reason I said I didn't want to get paired up against Reed was because I actually have a lifetime win record against Reed Duke in paper Magic tournaments from back in the day. We used to play old school PTQs in the Edison, New Jersey church basement. And I had a standard victory and a sealed victory against Reed back in the day. I mean, this is before he really went on the pro circuit. Like you would recognized him as like a SCG grinder because he wrote lots of articles for Star City Games. And don't you know, round 1, bam, we get the parry, and I'm like, this is a joke. But we got to play. Reed was on Golgari. A very, very good build of Golgari midrange. It wouldn't be really playing against Reed Duke unless they were playing Liliana the Veil for sure.
I mean, of course, yeah.
And I was on Jeskai Control, which really is the Boros control deck, splashing blue for Ral, and 3 steps ahead, and some counter spells in the sideboard. And my deck worked out. I don't know how to say it, but it worked out. We had a good match. And then, I lost against Golgari midrange round 2, won against Golgari midrange round 3, and lost against Dimir midrange round 4 in a very, very good match. So
nice.
All around, it was a good tournament. The beauty of Magic Online is it has a spectator mode. So when I'm not playing my match, I could watch somebody else's match. And I could commentate on that person's match while we were waiting for the next round to start.
That that sounds
It
like an
was
excellent
beautiful.
stream experience, I must say.
Yeah. So instead
Oh,
of there being sort of like this dead time in between rounds and events, or me having to pull up like a random match and hopefully I can finish it before the next, the time the round is up,
mm-hmm.
you don't have to worry about that with Magic Online because you can just exit out of the spectator mode whenever you want.
Nice.
The only thing you can't do is you can't see either player's hands in
Okay.
spectator mode, which is relevant because, people could
It'd
certainly
be
cheat in events that
yeah,
way, right?
sure.
Um, so I like that, but it does reveal hands after the game finishes. So whenever the match finishes, it shows you what was remaining in each player's hand, which is pretty cool.
Neat.
So yeah,
Hmm.
great experience. These creator events have been so fun to play in, even though I've gotten to play a bunch of different formats. So yeah, we're doing Dual Commander next month, and yeah, look forward to
Interesting.
playing some Planeswalkers.
Yeah, good luck with that. Absolutely. Yeah, that's awesome, dude. Thanks for
Yeah.
sharing. Yeah, appreciate it. Cool. So I suppose it's Duskmourn time, right? Because on my end, I mean, I've been streaming, I've been working, making podcasts, doing things.
Uh huh. Making some
Yeah.
jank. That's for sure.
There is definitely some jank to be had, and I've actually been doing a lot more of the It's funny. I have an event on my stream that I do Tuesday Brews Day, which is similar to the stuff that you do, like most nights, where
Yeah.
I play viewer submitted decks, and it's been very popular. And recently, I've been expanding it, so we end up doing two days a week often.
Oh, awesome.
If I have a deck that I'm really hot on, sometimes I'll take the time to really focus on that. But for the most part, recently I've been doing a lot of viewer stuff, and people have been finding some weird interactions, and then submitting to the stream, and it's so fun to see. Like yeah, GoCalper actually recently came up with a combo involving Gear Red and the Whisker Veil. Yeah,
Yeah.
I know you've seen the deck too. Yeah, we called it Whisker Twin. It's the silliest combo, and I just had an absolute it's one of those where as I'm doing the thing, I'm just giggling. It's just fun.
Right. You're like, wow,
you
this
know,
actually worked.
like this works. This shouldn't work. And
Yeah.
it's like this is like turn 5, and I'm just completely popping off. The whole idea
Yeah.
is you use Molten Duplication to copy a Whisker Veil. What is it? Whisker Veil Forerunner.
Hmm.
Which does like a little one-off collected company effect as a Valiant trigger when it's been copied. So you
Yeah.
make a copy of it, and then you hopefully spin into a Gear Red, or you have it on the field, which gives all your non-token creatures the ability to tap to copy a token. So you copy the
Hmm.
token Whisker Veil, which then spins again into another haste creature, which you can then tap to make another copy of the new one that you just made. It's so ridiculous. And yeah, it's absolute
Yeah.
nonsense. And then Imodane's Recruiter is just the ender, so like it hits,
Give
and then all your
haste, yeah.
tokens get haste. And it's preposterous. Like it shouldn't work, and it kind of does. It's yeah. Anyway,
Listen, that's what we're here for, jank, baby. Because
and the community can find the jank even when I'm feeling a little burnt out and I can not quite find in a line that is interesting or fresh. People will find it, and it's so fun.
Yeah.
Just when in doubt, open up the channels and listen to the folks out there, because yeah, the community is coming up with some cool stuff. So it's delightful. So that's what I've been doing.
That's awesome.
And you can be a part of that too. Twitch.tv/hamhawks42 or Twitch.tv/CFreverdo_junior. Links in the description. Anyway, there will be more plugs later, but for now, we have Duskmourn previews to chat about. And I want to get started with a very notable reprint before we dive into the new cards, because there's some new mechanics and new stuff. And we've talked about some of these already, but the bulk of the previews came out since that discussion that we have so far. But a card that is pretty notable is coming back, Pyroclasm. This card's been around a number of times, and if you're not familiar with Pyroclasm, it's a sorcery, 1 in a red at uncommon. It deals 2 damage to each creature. It's a 2-mana sweeper in red.
Simple. Listen, like I've said in the past plenty times here, I started playing Magic in 8th edition. Pyroclasm was a pretty regular part of my life when I started playing Magic.
Oh, for sure.
Either for good reasons or bad reasons. Something that keeps the aggro decks in check is when you can play early Wraths. And when rotation happened, we lost like Path of Peril and Black. So Black lost like their early Wrath because they only have Deadly Cover up now on 5. But Pyroclasm keeps like the Gruul aggro deck in check to deal 2 to their creatures. Mono red, Convoke on 2. So important to try to Wrath on 2 or 3 in most cases for folks who are playing temporary lockdown. This and making this card only one red pip rather than multiple of a
Mm-hmm.
color allows it to be splashable in pretty much any deck. And I know we're going to get to it in the previews talks today about the new lands. Um, we can splash anything.
Yes.
So, Pyroclasm being one of those main cards that's able to do that is great. It means you can't play things with little butts anymore, big butts only. And it's not going to hit every card. That's relevant, but it hits the decks that matter.
Right.
And so this is a very, very much so a welcome reprint into Duskmourn. And this is going to be in standard for 3 years. So,
Yeah.
hey, I'm here for it.
Yeah, me too. And it's funny, like I when I first saw it, my immediate gut reaction is, well, Boros Convoke's fallen out of favor. How good is this really going to be? But then when you really stop and think about it, it's like, wait, Monastery Mentor without a spell up is 2 toughness. Slickshot Show Off, 2 toughness. Picnic Ruiner, like they all get hit by this if they don't have mana up to prowess, and so it forces those decks to play around this. Like this is hate that can deal with that. I love it. And you're right. This is going to be primo splashable. And this is going to be an effect that you're going to want to coming out of your sideboard. I wouldn't be surprised if at some point we see a 2-color deck that has red lands in it and this in the sideboard. I can totally see that. Yeah. Yeah. It's lovely. Welcome, Pyroclasm. We're happy to have you.
Welcome back.
Yes,
Finally.
welcome back.
I'm not sure when the last time Pyroclasm was actually in standard. I mean, had to be during 10th edition, maybe. That's a set symbol that has X in it, or maybe it was in M11 or something.
It looks like
this.
It was in M11 because I'm looking through the other editions that have been printed, and it was included in the list at one point. It was included in a bunch of master sets, dual decks, those kind of things. But yeah, it looks like the last
13 years ago.
Yeah, the last M11 was the last standard legal printing of it. So yeah. Wow. And so, yes, and so that means, dear listener, if you have been playing the game for a long time, or you have a shoebox at your mom's house that has some Magic cards in it, there's a good chance you have a copy of this.
They used to have it. I'm talking a while ago. Wizards used to have Magic player rewards, and you would get cards like singles shipped home to you based on your level of play in the DCI. And Pyroclasm, the textless. And the old textless Magic Player Rewards cards were so legit. You had Mana Leak, you had Pyroclasm, you had Wrath of God, but Pyroclasm was one of them. And these are absolutely beautiful. You used to get these for free, and they used to actually be worth money because it was, amazing. Again, based on your level of play. And those were before we had 20,000 different treatments of cards. So this was unique to get and exciting to play in your decks when this was legal at the time.
I love it. Yeah, nowadays, a lot of the Texas cards that we see are ones that are kind of, they see some competitive play. I mean, meaning no disrespect to 4-color Omnath by any means, or Urza Saga, the newest one that we've seen. But it seems like they're just picking the complicated ones because it's funny to have Texas complicated cards because everyone has Scryfall in their pocket anyway, so whatever. But to see just a playable uncommon in a fancy rare version like this at a time when textless cards or borderless cards were very rare. Yeah. That's special. I dig it. Yeah, good stuff. But yeah, Pyroclasm. Welcome back. Again, welcome back. Although, the next one that I want to talk about, we get to say welcome back to a new cycle that I'm not super keen on, but I'm curious what your thoughts are. So the ley lines are back, right? Yeah. They're bringing us a new sequence of ley lines, which are notoriously hard to balance. And the green one was spoiled since we last talked, and I want to touch on this. Leyline of Mutation. It is an enchantment for 2 green. If it's in your opening hand, you can just start with it. Pre-game actions. You'll love to see it. And you may pay Wooburg rather than pay the mana cost for spells that you cast. So it's a free Fist of Suns or OG Joda just on the field at the start of the game.
So the question is, how playable is this in Standard? And, the first thing that comes to my mind is, what are your spells that you would rather just pay 5 colors of mana than its actual mana cost? And so it's got to be some payoff spell, right? Like Atraxa. You could pay 7 mana for Atraxa now, but what if you could pay 5 mana for Atraxa?
Well, and so basically what you're doing there is you're taking the 2 generic and converting into 1 red. And
right.
Is that worth the price of admission?
in some decks, maybe it makes like Atraxa more of like a splashable card. In other decks that wouldn't otherwise play the card. We do have this thing called Ancient Cornucopia in Standard right now, and that is also a green card that lets you tap for mana of any color and gains you life. And Ancient Cornucopia gains you life equal to the number of colors that the card it casts is. So if you cast Atraxa, you gain 4. Cast like Annie joins up, gain 3, so on and so forth.
Right.
And so what's interesting is like we just talked about the demon, Valgavoth.
Valgavoth, the
right?
9-drop. Yeah.
Valgavoth is 9. What if you could pay 5 for Valgavoth?
And that's the thing. I think the cost reduction from 7 to 5 isn't really enough to merit a card in my deck that could be a dead draw, late in the game. So, but if there's a 9 or a 10 drop that's viable that I want to get out early, then that reduction is meaningful all of a sudden. So yeah, like if I want to get Valgavoth out in a 5-color deck, it also has 3 black in its mana cost. So this would eliminate that as well. So if I'm doing 5-color shenanigans, I mean, reducing a spell by 4, well, okay, now all of a sudden we're talking. And even then, if I have to play Leyline of Mutation fairly just for its mana cost, I'm still getting 4 mana off of the spell I'm casting with it. So you can kind of argue that. Whereas if I have to pay a 4-drop to reduce a cost by 2 in the case of Atraxa, it's like, was that worth it? I don't know. That just seems,
I don't know. It, I don't want to say that this is a bad card in terms of Standard.
Right. Yeah.
Because we have the tools to be able to cast things for 5 different colors of mana.
Right.
But I think this is like kind of weirdly placed in this set in particular, because it's very clear that there's like a Reanimator sub-theme in this set with multiple cards, and we're going to talk about some of them too. So like having a card that changes the mana cost of a card to be 5 colors doesn't seem to fit. My other sort of thought is maybe this goes into some non-standard decks, and I'm not talking about Commander. All of these cards are Commander playable, right?
100%.
This card, though, I think you could only play this card in a 5-color deck in Commander, if I'm not mistaken, since it has all 5 colors in the card.
Yes, and before anyone says it in the comments, yes, with Morophon, this will make all the cards of the chosen type free. That does work, and that's nuts. So this is going to be a money card. It's going to be good in Commander, but in Standard, is there a place for it? Yeah.
So it makes you think: is there a place for it in like Pioneer, where you were able to play like the mono green deck, and this is another free ley line that you can put in play that has 2 pips on it. Not that you'll ever cast a card in that mono green deck for 5 colors, but just another free 2 pip. Like if you play Leyline of the Guild Pact plus this, and you're able to rock out Nykthos. Nykthos is automatically making 7 colors of mana or 7 mana for 2 mana, albeit anything else on the battlefield. Don't know that that's worth it, but it's something that is possible. But think about some of the older payoff cards that exist in some of the older formats that you might want to pay 5 mana for. I'd rather pay 5 mana for a Blightsteel Colossus, for sure. Rather than 12 mana, if you're not like cheating it into play. So who knows? Maybe we can see this played in some of the older formats, or there'll be some really cool Standard jank, which you're able to take advantage of this. And if there's anybody that knows anything about jank, pretty sure it's us.
We're familiar with that. Yeah, exactly. And the folks listening out there, we know that you know a thing or two about jank. So if you find some interesting interaction that we aren't seeing right now, please let us know. Because I'm definitely curious. This is one of those where it's going to, I suspect decks that want it, it's going to be a very good card in that deck. And decks and most other decks that are just trying to do kind of a general mid-range plan, this isn't even going to be a consideration. In formats like with Eldrazi, like I kind of want to try it in Timeless to see if I can like cast, the new Emrakul for 5. Like that seems good, So I'm sure there are opportunities. Who knows? This is the kind of card that like some vintage player is going to find a way to break this, and it's going to ruin everything. And we'll
it'll
hear
jump
about
from a $5 card to like a $15 card, and
it's going to be one of those. One of the many cards that will probably see no meaningful play in Standard, and it's just going to blow up in older format. Yeah, I can see that. As ley lines sometimes do. Anyway, so Cool. So yeah, Leyline of Mutation. It'll be interesting. So next up, they're giving us a cycle of lands, and I feel we should probably chat about this because they're pretty good. So there's a cycle of them. We're getting 5 of them in this set, and they're called the Verges. So for example, there's Blazemire Verge, which is a land that taps for black. And it enters untapped meaningfully. It doesn't have any land types, so it doesn't help with your domain or any of that jazz. But it does enter untapped. Did I mention it enters untapped? That's a big deal. I cannot overstate that. So it taps for black, or it can tap for red, but you can only activate that ability if you control a swamp or a mountain. So this is a weird design where the lands care about basic land types, but they themselves do not bring any to the table.
Right.
So how do we feel about these?
So at worst, right, all of these lands are a come into play, untapped version of whatever it produces, right? So in the case of Blazemire Verge, this will always enter and create swamp, right?
Yeah.
Or create black mana. So even if, let's say, you were playing a mono black deck and you wanted to splash for some red cards in your main deck or your sideboard, play 4 of this card. There's no downside outside to having one, a non-basic land that matters for cards like Sunspine Links that deal you damage, or obviously this doesn't help in older formats if you're playing like Blood Moon, but there are better lands in those older formats.
Right.
Yes, they can get Demolition Field, right? In which case you just search up another basic in your deck because you are playing basic lands, right? And these actually work alongside the Surveil lands quite well because the Surveil lands have basic land types. So let's say you even wanted to play some Rakkus Theater in your mono black deck, again, for the red splash for some reason. Or you wanted to just play a Rakdos deck, in which this is going to fit perfect in because it's making black no matter what. And it's going to make your mana base a little bit better. It's just not a basic land type. So, you know, I think that the decks that will play this more than not are your aggressive decks. Like your Gruul aggro decks are going to be able to play Thornspine Verge, which is taps for a red or green if you control a mountain or forest. It will make 3-color aggro decks easier to play. Which are difficult right now given the types of lands that we have. Let's say you don't want to play like Restless Ridgeline, which is the red-green creature land, because that doesn't fit in an aggro deck. You don't want your lands to come into play tapped ever. You could play something like this instead and splash your 3rd color for whatever you want. And we'll get to talking about this soon, but there are lots of spicy multicolored cards in this set for which these lands will be very much so helpful for you to cast in aggressive decks. So it's interesting, though, because in this set, they didn't give us all the either enemy or allied lands. They actually gave us a mixture. So there is Thornspine Verges is red-green, like you see on the screen here now. For those of you watching, you saw the Blazemire Verge, which is red-black. There is Gloom Lake Verge, which is blue-black. So taps for blue or black if you control swamp or island. There is Hushwood Verge, which taps for a green or white if you control plains or forest. And then the last one is Flood Farm Verge, which taps for a white or blue if you control an island or plains. Very notably, these also work pretty nice alongside the fast lands that we have from Phyrexia All Will Be One, which tap for dual color and come to play untapped if you play them for your first 3 lands of the game. I'm very excited that now you no longer have to play Thran Portal in any of the decks that you were trying to play Thran Portal, because that land, in my opinion, and I'm sorry for my Thran Portal enjoyers out there, was abysmal. Like, yes, you got your basic land type, but every time I saw a deck list with that card, I'm just like, give me a basic land instead. There's no reason to play this.
only one deck that I've ever seen use Thran Portal successfully, and that's Bats, because they want to be hurting themselves. That is it. Outside of that, hard pass forever on Thran Portal.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I'm excited for this land cycle. I will note that they did say on the preview stream that they are going to be finishing this cycle in a future set. I would assume that they're going to do this in standard, since we have a 3-year standard and it might be in a future standard set.
Yeah, probably.
So that way the entire 10 exists. But we can bet a lot of money that the rest of the cycle won't be in foundations, because that wouldn't make sense. So maybe in the set, whatever occurs after that, or so on and so forth.
Right. Yeah, at some point next year, I'm sure we'll see these. So yeah, interesting stuff. Yeah, and I agree with everything you're saying, because right now, standard mana bases are so weird, because we have the fast lands, which are like the premier lands, and like I find myself using the pain lands a lot just to make sure that a land can come in untapped on 4. Like the slow lands from Innistrad, I miss those so much, like way more than I expected to in standard. And so yeah, these are going to fill those slots perfectly. And notably, so they tap for 1 color. So we have the Flood Farm Verge up right now. It taps for white. And the other mode, you can activate it as long as you have a plains or an island. Like you don't need another island in play in order for this to be a blue source. So you mentioned, like you started off talking about splashes. These are the perfect splash lands. You know, they're like tailor made for it.
Yeah.
If you have a monocolor deck and you have 1 splash card in there, throw 4 of these in. They're not going to hurt you at all. Like in most cases, you know, and it's wonderful. I think these are gonna see play immediately, and are definitely going to smooth out mana bases and provide a fun challenge when you're working through your mana base now in standard, which is exactly what I want. Like there are, with domain being so prevalent, you know, any deck running Leyline Binding probably doesn't want these. You know, I would highly recommend like reconsidering them at, you know, you better have a very good reason for including any of these in those decks. But a lot of these good mid-range decks right now are going to just gobble these up. I love it. Yeah, it's good stuff. Yeah, cool design. I like it. Yeah, Wizards seems to have understood now that the land type is an important knob that they can start turning to modify. So there was a time when like I feel like every non-rare land entered tapped, and that was just and even a lot of the rare ones, like if it was decent, it just entered tapped. Period. Like I'm looking at you, Temples. Like you what's up with? Well, anyway.
I also just think that these lands are the closest thing we've gotten ever to an actual dual land.
Yeah.
Like the original like tundra scrubland type cycle. I mean, obviously they don't have the basic land types, but this has got to be the closest to us ever getting something like that.
In a lot of scenarios, these will just be untapped dual lands that don't hurt you on the way in. Yeah, it's fantastic. Yeah, I dig it. Yeah, I love that design. And scoop these up while you can, because a lot of times we don't talk. Yeah, we don't talk. we don't talk finance often, but this is the kind of thing that will be relatively inexpensive when the set first drops, and it's probably only going to go up. You know.
And right now, if you take a look at some of the other land cycles that are in standard right now, specifically from Karlov Manor, we have the Surveil lands. The Surveil lands have been creeping up in price, and upon Duskmourn's release, I would anticipate them going up higher, because these work really well with the Surveil lands to make your dual sources. Your Surveil lands are also seeing play in Pioneer and in Modern. You know, even if they play like 1 of each Surveil land in their deck in Modern, they're fetchable. So if you haven't been able to get these yet and you're trying to get them cheap, now's the cheapest you're going to get them. They're just going to creep up in price. So
well, and if you're playing in any fetch land formats, like I dabble in Timeless, and like whatever colors I'm in, I just have 1 of each of the Surveillance, because like just fetching them, it's the opportunity cost is very low and they're just fantastic. And that's a great example of a scenario where those Surveillance are different from the Verges, because you can't do like that interaction does not match with the Verges at all. And so in Eternal formats, they're probably not going to be quite as good outside of, you know, some of those monocolor or dual color situations, but in standard, holy cow, these are going to be great. Good stuff. All right, so next up, I want to talk about the Overlords. So there's a series of Avatar horrors that have a new ability called Impending, which is notable. Let's go ahead and take a look. So first, so the one I want to talk about right now is Overlord of the Mistmoors. This is a 6/6 for 7, but it has an impending cost for 2 white. And what impending is if you cast it for its impending cost, it enters the battlefield as an enchantment and not a creature, and it enters with time counters on it. So in this case, 4 time counters, and it's kind of like suspend. Like you remove one each turn, and then once they're gone, it's now a creature as well. And so you get the ETB in this case. Whenever Overlord of the Mistmoors enters or attacks, create 2/2/1 white insect creature tokens with flying. So, and it is an enchantment creature, so even after all those counters are gone, or if you just hardcast it for 7, you do have an enchantment creature in this situation. So it's an enchantment no matter what, but whether or not it's a creature varies. Yeah. So what are your thoughts on this cycle, and specifically the Overlord of the Mistmoors?
Yeah, so when they first previewed these cards, we saw one, like before Bloomborough even came out, right? We saw the green one, and nobody knew what impending did because they didn't release like the text with it, right? So you're like, what is this?
Yeah, I think they showed the showcase art that didn't have the reminder text on it. Yeah.
Yeah. And so when they talked about the panel at PAX West, they described these as this set series of Titans. So trying to compare them to like Primeval Titan, Sun Titan, Frost Titan, so on and so forth. And so at first look at this card, right, if you straight up cast it for 7 mana, it enters as a 6/6 and gets you 2/2/1 flyers. So it gets you 10 power worth of creatures for 7 mana, which is pretty relevant given 2 of them have some sort of invasion. Or, sorry, not invasion, evasion. But for 4 mana at sorcery speed, this gets you 2/2/1s with flying that in 4 turns get you the 6/6 body. So it sits there as the enchantment. And then when it comes off of being impended, you can attack with it because it's been on the battlefield. It doesn't have summoning sickness. So that'll let you attack with it and develop another 2/2/1s with flying. So I think this card in particular is actually quite strong, given how the Boros control deck has sort of started to emerge as one of the top decks in Standard. Being able to pay 4 mana, make 2/2/1s, draw a card off Caretaker's Talent. Get a big body 4 turns from now, just in case your opponent, because your opponent can't Sunfall this when it's an enchantment.
Exactly.
So after your opponent's wasted all the wraths, you still get this big body afterwards.
Yeah. Well, and funnily enough, like the Boros control packages that we see with Urbrass Forge, Caretaker's Talent, and whatnot, they're packing Sunfall and things like that. And so, like, yeah, if you lose a couple insects, whatever, the big beater is going to be coming up later. Anyway, it's. I think this card's actually, I'm with you. I think it's pretty darn good. It's a very competitive rate.
It's fantastic.
Yeah, A+, honestly. The one note about impending that I want to call out is I likened it to suspend. With suspend, you remove the counter on your upkeep. With impending, you actually remove the counter at your end step, which I think is going to be really relevant for these cards specifically because they have that attack trigger. And so on my end step is when I remove the counter, it's now a creature. It's now a creature during your whole turn before I get to attack with it. And so the timing on that, I feel like it was very intentional. And as a result, though, the impending 4 doesn't look like as imposing of a number because the first turn one's going to drop off. So, okay, it's only 3 more turns, but you don't get to attack with it immediately just because of the timing of the turn. So I think that was clever. If your opponent wants to respond with a go for the throat, they can before you get an attack trigger. But they'll have to use it on their turn or on your, prior to combat on yours. So... I think that's a clever bit of timing that I think a lot of people are gonna get stuck on, but that is a thing, which again is another one of the knobs they could turn to balance these cards, and I think it will make them a little more fair. They're not as busted as I would like them to be, but that's probably for the best.
And another thing I want to just point out about these cards with impending is because they are time counters, meaning that they are also subject to being removed. So we have cards in Standard now like Glissa Sunslayer. One of the modes are when Glissa connects, you can remove 3 counters from target permanent. And it is a permanent on the board, right? It's not like Suspend that it floats there and you're able to cast it. It's already there. And we also have cards like Render Inert, that remove 5
Mm-hmm.
counters from a permanent for 3 mana and draws you a card. And that's been a significantly underplayed uncommon.
Mm-hmm.
That really,
Absolutely.
up to this point, we've only seen in decks playing like Invasion of Amonkhet to try to
Right.
like cheese out some big creature from a yard on turn 4 as
Which
a pseudo reanimator spell.
which is fun jank for sure, but
Yeah.
yeah, it's tough to make that competitive. Yeah. But all of a sudden, having a battle package alongside Render Inert, and then also having these impending creatures all together in the same deck, maybe that'll make Render Inert a little more powerful. Like, that's a fun idea. I like it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so and there are other overlords that have different impending
Mm-hmm.
numbers on them, based on, I assume, is their presumed power level. Um,
Right.
the one that we had seen before Duskmourn came out was the green overlord, that essentially is really good in domain, because it makes a land that's every basic land type.
Yep.
Overlord of the
Hauntwoods.
Hauntwoods,
Yep.
yeah. Um, and so, they're all powerful in their own right. I would encourage y'all to check it out. I don't know that all of them are standard playable. I think we've
Mm-hmm.
seen them all spoiled. But if I had to bet some money, Mistmoors that y'all just saw, the white one, the green one, Hauntwoods, and the red one seems like it will be very playable. Overlord of the
Boiler
Boiler.
Bilges.
Yeah, that's it.
Boiler Bilges. That is going to be mispronounced at a pre-release near you in the not too distant future. Yeah. So which is a 5/5 for 4 red, impending 4 for 2 red,
Hmm.
and whenever it enters or attacks, it deals 4 damage to any target. I
Yeah.
mean,
So for four
Titans that
mana,
deal damage. I don't know.
yeah,
I mean,
for sure.
yeah.
Just for 6 mana, casting this on 6 for
Mm-hmm.
five for to get a 5/5 deal 4 to something. Um, let's also talk about how I'm very happy to like hit this off of an Atali Primal Conqueror. Like, get
Oh.
creature in play, deal damage. While we're at it, let's have Elish Norn, so we're gonna make the triggers happen twice. Like, hello, like this is my type of a game with these
Yep. Oh my.
cards.
And notably too, these overlords, despite the name, what the name might suggest, they're not legendary. So like
No,
Calamity could get mounted from one of these, and like it could get stupid. Yeah,
I can
yeah.
doppelgang them. Like,
Hey, exactly.
I can doppelgang this card. I can put this on the battlefield for 4 mana as the
Mm-hmm.
enchantment and doppelgang it as the enchantment.
Yeah. Oh, and this deck also has like a Kiki Jiki variant in it with the Jolly Balloon Man, which I don't. I think we
Yeah,
talked about it, but yeah,
we did.
like
Yeah,
yeah, that one it, like also can copy all of these. It's just it's silly. It's silly. Yeah. So
great cards. Love
this
it.
is one of those. They are expensive for what you get, but what you get is really really nice. And so I'll
Hmm.
be shocked if they don't find, if some of these don't find a home somewhere. Yeah,
Right.
but I think I'm with you. I think the white one and the green one are just fit the current meta, pretty well. And then definitely will find homes. So good stuff. Overlords. Let's go. All right. So moving on from our big nasty horror nightmares. Amidst it all, there is hope. In fact, there's Nico, Light of Hope,
Ooh.
who is a 3/4 for 2 white blue, and Nico's back, y'all. They're back. When Nico Light of Hope enters, you create 2 shard tokens. If you don't remember shard tokens, Nico Eris, the very first, the first and only other depiction of Nico that we have from Kaldheim,
Mhm.
was a planeswalker that created shard tokens as well, and
Yep.
they're enchantments with the ability to pay 2, sacrifice them, scry 1, then draw a card. So shards are kind of like treasures or clues or something like that, and the effect you get is opt, effectively. Um,
Mhm.
and you pay 2 tap, exile target non-legendary creature you control. Shards you control become copies of it until the beginning of your next end step. Return to the battlefield under owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. So we were just talking about making copies of legendary things.
Yeah.
Or non-legendary things rather, and this is doing double duty because it's the shards are all becoming that thing, and then the creature is returning at the end step. So you're getting a chance to, you're doing all the blinky shenanigans that we know and love,
Mhm.
and then on top of that, you're also getting additional copies, at least 2, because of this ability that you get
Right.
to attack with or whatever. Um,
So
how good is this card? Yeah.
this Nico works with all of the uh, overlords,
All of
right?
them. Yep.
Because they're all non-legendary.
Yep.
Um, I think Nico also works really well with any type of clone effect, whether that be in standard or otherwise. Because if you make the shards copy of the non-legendaries, you could play cards like Mockingbird
Mm-hmm.
to copy the shard tokens, and then Mockingbird doesn't turn back into a shard. It
Mm-hmm.
just remains whatever that copy was. Um, and this card also works alongside the Balloon Man pretty good.
Yep.
Just making copies of all of your things is
Absolutely.
pretty neat. Um, and the shard tokens, by themselves, even if you don't create them into a copy of something, they do let you scry and draw. Um,
And there are
you
also
know,
artifacts on the board if you care about that. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so all around, I like that this Nico is much more playable than the Planeswalker version was, because
Mm-hmm.
that the other Nico was not that great constructed playability wise.
Right.
I've seen some Commander decks with Nico in it, but not so much like Standard or anything like that
Right.
at the time. 3/4 is also a really good stat line.
Mm-hmm.
It's not dying to cards like Cut Down. It's not dying to Lightning Helix, Lightning Strike, so on and so forth. Um, so it's got much more playability to stay around a while. And if you don't answer Nico, then they will be able to really take off that next turn. Imagine, if you're just playing a blue-white like tempo deck, not saying that you would pair necessarily Monastery Mentor alongside of Nico, but you could then turn the shards into Monastery Mentor tokens, start casting non-creature spells and making copies.
Oh, heck yeah.
Making a bunch of prowess monks.
Yeah.
Um, so that's something very bare minimum I think that you could do with Nico. So I'm excited to try out some decks with this creature.
Heck yeah. No, I'm with you. And the other thing about adding like blink effects, you can blink Nico to make more shards. And so you can
Yeah.
have even more of them as you're going about your day and doing the crazy things. And that you could also use, ephemerate style effects to protect Nico as you're doing, from removal and whatnot. So the
The
opportunity here
other
is great. And the other thing that I love all of these things you're saying, but it creates an interesting deck building challenge because the copies that you make don't enter; they were already there. And
Yes.
so, what are you copying? Like, if you make a whole bunch of Carnosaur copies, they're all still 7/6 tramplers, great, but you're not going to discover off of them. So,
Hmm.
when you're building your deck and trying to figure out, okay, what's the ideal thing to turn the shards into, you're probably going to try to avoid, enter the battlefield
Yeah.
triggers, which or at least I would advise it if you're going for max value. So that's kind of
Yeah.
an interesting conundrum. And the overlords are great in that regard because they have the attack trigger. So sure, whatever,
Hmm.
you'll get the value. But I don't know. It's just cool. And the other thing that I absolutely adore about this from a casual perspective, like for Commander and whatnot, is it makes old Nico better. Which
Oh
was a
yeah.
card that wasn't really that great. Like, and I opened one at one point, so I have a Nico, and it's like I want to find a place for that card. It's just not quite that great because like you can sink mana into it and make a whole bunch of shards. Like, well, what am I going to do with shards? Well, this is what you're going to do with
This
shards.
is yeah.
Yeah. So I like that. I think that's cool. So it's cool design, and I love seeing Nico back because they introduced Nico in Kaldheim, and we haven't seen them since. And so I'm glad to see the character return. And this card's cool. I dig
Yeah,
it.
and I like the storyline that they had made. Not that I've read all of the Duskmourn story yet, and I'm not going to spoil it for y'all who are listening. But Nico being aptly named the Light of Hope is definitely a homage to what's happening in the story at this particular time.
Mhm.
So we have the reintroduction of Nico in a positive light, whereas though I don't think Nico had a chance to shine the first time that they were printed, and the story wasn't really that great to show you who Nico actually is. Um,
Yeah.
so if you have a chance to go listen to the audiobooks of the story that came out, I would greatly encourage you to do that.
And that's been on my list. I need to knock that out. Yeah. Well, the idea behind Nico originally is because Nico, fun fact, was introduced in Kaldheim, but
Hmm.
because that was the plane that they first planeswalked to. They're actually from Theros, interestingly
Yeah.
enough. Yeah, they were like an Olympian athlete in Theros, and the shards are actually like represented as like the way that when they fight with them, they treat them almost like javelins. It's
Yeah.
very yeah, they're an athlete who was kind of running away from Theros, and and ended up in Call Time, and now is on Duskmourn. So I always thought the story was interesting, and I'm curious. So I'll definitely have to
And now
take a listen to those.
desparked.
And now desparked, and it actually looks. I'm noticing for the first time a watermark on the normal printing of this on the behind the rules text, and it actually shows the Planeswalker symbol with almost like a little lightning bolt like scar in the middle of it, which is interesting. Which I'm assuming they're using for all the desparked walkers.
Yep.
Which is cool. I like that. I've never noticed that before. Yeah, good stuff. All right. Speaking of good stuff, this is a horror set. There are horrible things and horrific things and horror pastiches and references. And one of them is in the traditional horror movie monster with Unstoppable Slasher. This is just Jason Voorhees, the card, although it kind of has a Leatherface vibe too. I don't know. They did a good job of kind of melding the vibe of a lot of horror monsters into this guy. But we have a zombie assassin, 2/3 for 2 and a black. With Death Touch, of course, whenever Unstoppable Slasher deals combat damage to a player, they lose half their life rounded up. Mm-hmm. And when Unstoppable Slasher dies, if it had no counters on it, return to the battlefield tapped under its owner's control with 2 stunned counters on it. So interesting design. Is it good? That is the question.
Well, the first thing that comes to mind that you've probably heard other people talk about in regards to this card is the combo that it has with Bloodletter of Aclazotz from Ixalan. So if you're not familiar with Bloodletter of Aclazotz, it says whenever, your creature were to make your opponent lose life, they lose twice that instead. So yeah, thank you for pulling it up on the screen. When an opponent would lose life during your turn, they lose twice that much life instead. It's exactly that. So, when Unstoppable Slasher would connect with Bloodletter of Aclazotz out, you would deal 4 because its power is 2, but then its triggered ability says they lose half their life rounded up. So with Bloodletter of Aclazotz, they would lose half their life rounded up twice, which means they're dead. So it is a turn 4 combo if you are able to play this card into Bloodletter of Aclazotz. Now, that being said, there are tons of amazing 3-drops that exist in the current standard format. And if, something that you can make like a direct sort of comparison to when you're trying to figure out what 3-drop would you rather play in your deck in an efficient mid-range shell, I'm thinking of Preacher of the Schism, also from Ixalan,
right?
Which is a 2/4, which is extremely relevant. Being 3 toughness on Unstoppable Slasher, it is subject to removal like Torch the Tower with the bargain cost to exile it, Lightning Helix, Lightning Strike, Strangle just rotated, but anything that's dealing 3 damage to get rid of the card. Whereas Preacher does not get destroyed by either of those cards. And Preacher has the possibility of making you an additional 1/1 body with lifelink and the ability to draw a card and lose a life. So, if you're playing a green-black mid-range deck or Tamir mid-range deck and you have to pick one of these options over the other, I think Slam Dunk Preacher the Schism is the better option because it also has Death Touch. If you are trying to do Bloodletter of Aclazotz shenanigans, though, in like Mono Black or Rakdos mid-range or something like this, then I think Unstoppable Slasher is your choice. That's because you also have another card that came out in Outlaws of Thunder Junction called Rush of Dread, which also combos with Bloodletter of Aclazotz, because one of the spree abilities on Rush of Dread says target opponent loses half of their life rounded up, which is the same line of text on Unstoppable Slasher. So now you have the possibility of having a combo kill on turn 4 or turn 5 in the same standard deck.
Right.
So does Mono Black, with its infinite amount of removal and card draw capabilities, and Shieldred the Apocalypse, just become naturally a good mid-range shell without having to add any other color? I'll also point you back at the Verge lands that we just talked about, because there are 2 lands that tap for just black mana but
Yep.
have the ability to tap for other colors of mana too. So maybe this is where we start to see some of the monocolored mid-range decks that just want to splash for the occasional card
Right.
rise because of the better mana bases now.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. And yeah, Slasher is interesting because I feel like the card itself is good. Like I think the card is genuinely strong, but
Mm-hmm.
alongside Preacher, I completely agree. Preacher is just significantly better. And I'm not asking the Preacher to move over to make room for Slasher. That's just
Yeah.
not, and it's Preacher's one of those cards where it's just going to be good as a 4 of wherever it's good as a 1 of. So you're just
Mm-hmm.
I can't imagine like it's going to get outpaced, unfortunately. The flavor on this card is interesting. I feel like the secondary text on it is going to be kind of irrelevant because it makes it, all of a sudden you don't want to put it in any deck where you might end up putting a counter on it of any kind, no matter how beneficial
Right.
that might be, because all of a sudden, like barring an indestructible counter, all of a sudden it makes death a possibility. Like even a +1/+1
Right.
counter on this. Like honestly, the way that I want to deal with this on the other side of the field is to give it a +1/+1 counter with an effect
Yeah.
and then kill it. Which like that actually would take care of it. But additionally, even if you do, so if you play this out on turn 3, and let's say it takes a go for the throat right away, we're already on turn 3. It dies. It comes back with 2 stuns on it. We're looking at turn 6 before I'm able to actually attack with it again. And I mean, how long are standard games going? Like an average standard game is what, turn 7, turn 8? Like,
Yeah. 7 to 9.
I mean, that secondary text, as far as standard is concerned, might as well not be there. I think in a lot of cases, and that's even only if you play it out right on 3. Are you likely to actually untap with this thing after that anyway? So if you top deck this late in the game, and it dies to cut down as well for the even if only temporarily, it's a 3-drop that can get hit by a cut down. So
Yeah.
I feel like in standard it's going to be just kind of a
And
non-starter. Like,
its creature types are kind of relevant for
Yeah.
formats outside of standard, especially zombie. And I say that only because a lot of the zombie cards rotated out when Innistrad sets left standard. But also assassin is interesting because I keep seeing them printing creature types that are also outlaws. And
Yes.
I love that the design team is doing this to make sure that these cards are interacting with cards from the older sets. Especially since they're going to be in standard together for quite a while. Because they used to not do that at all or care about that in
Right.
previous Magic set design. You would get like your creature types that existed in, let's say, set 1 and 2, and then not see them until the very tail end again, in which they rotate out. They see a whole like 6 months that you could play them together, and so long farewell. It doesn't matter anymore.
Right.
So, the fact that they keep printing these relevant creature types on them to interact with sets that recently came out is pretty nice.
Yeah, I like that. Well, and also speaking to, compatibility, assassin seems like a really deliberate type here. Because I mean, yeah, it's a person who kills people, so sure, assassin makes sense. But I mean, the Assassin's Creed set just came out for Commander folks, and this can all of a sudden tee up, free running and things like that if that's something you care about. So okay, neat. Like the synergy points are there for other formats if you want to find them, and that's cool. I'm glad to see that.
Yep.
But yeah, it sounds like we're kind of in agreement that not great. There are plenty of standards where this would be very good.
Yeah.
We just have better options right now. It's really the bottom line, I think. All right. Good stuff. Next up, Wildfire Wicker Folk. So it's a scarecrow. We got a new scarecrow. It's a 3/2 artifact creature with haste for red-green. And it also has delirium. It gets +1/+1 and it has trample as long as you have delirium. So 4 or more card types in your graveyard.
Yeah. So, a lot of very relevant things on this card. And honestly, I think, in my opinion, this is my favorite card that's been spoiled so far in this set because of how playable it is. Red green to be able to cast that on turn 2, very easy given the mana bases that we have in standard. One of the Verge lands is also red green. So very much so castable on turn 2. It's a 3/2 with haste. So yes, friends, it does die to cut down. It does die to shock, lightning helix, so on and so forth. One notable spell it does not die to is Go for the Throat, because it is an artifact, right?
Let's go.
And for the Throat is the best 2-mana removal spell that we currently have in Standard. So it avoids that problem. It actually avoids the problem of getting cut down. And the reason it does that is because when this creature is in the yard, it fulfills the artifact and creature type. So you've already got 2 pieces of Delirium available to you. If you're playing instants and sorceries and lands yourself, this will not be very hard to hit. Delirium over the time will just happen for you. And when it does, then this becomes a 2-drop 4/3 haste trample, which is very strong and no longer dies to cards like Cut Down. So you avoid that problem and the Go for the Throat problem. Yes, it still dies to Lightning Helix. Yes, it still dies to Lightning Strike. Find me another spot removal spell that's going to kill this in the relevant Standard decks at the time, right? It's going to be pretty hard to do. So this card is very good. And I certainly would hope sees play in some type of a Gruul aggro deck. It does compete for slots against cards like Slick Shot Show Off, Codebreaker, that is the 2/1 Goblin with prowess, that also like wheels your hand. But this is very strong in my opinion. We don't really have aggressive cards like this currently in Standard that pumps itself without assistance. So, I expect fully for this to be played in Standard.
100%.
Yeah.
Well, and I completely agree with you. I think it's going to see play in Standard. This is one of those I wouldn't be surprised if it starts seeing play in some older formats as well. Like getting Delirium in formats like Modern, not hard. When you have access to fetch lands and whatnot, that's not going to be difficult at all. And so, I mean, a 4/3 trample haste for 2? Like, I don't know those metas well enough to say exactly what decks, but like there's got to be somebody who will look at that. I mean, that's
the Dragon's Rage Channelers deck. Gotta love this card because
100%.
they need Delirium to make DRC a 3/3 flyer.
Yeah,
so
they're already doing all
that
stuff. 100%. Yeah, they're already doing all those things. So adding another threat to the mix that also helps them achieve Delirium. That sounds wonderful. Let's really ramp up those unholy heats even farther. Yeah. Well, and also the opportunity to cast an instant to achieve Delirium and kind of get 2 combat tricks worth of 1. That opportunity is pretty cool here if it lines up. So it allows for some really clever play on top of just being a bonkers powerful design. So, yeah.
Yeah, and the red-green decks have been growing in popularity. Playing cards like Snakeskin Veil to be able to give your creature +1/+1 and hexproof until end of turn, or Monstrous Rage is playable in these decks, just in case you want to give this trample.
Right.
And avoid cut down after playing Monstrous Rage on it. So it's pretty good. I will be very surprised if there's not this doesn't have an inclusion in the Gruul aggro deck as it exists now. Or if it does a little bit 100%. Of tinkering to fit this in, because this card is amazing.
Yeah. Well, and I also love the fact that it's a Scarecrow, because I feel like for the last couple of years, Scarecrows have been kind of throwaway uncommons. It's like, let's throw Reaper King players an option. And half the time it's not even worth it. It's just like, we just need another Scarecrow so that the purists can remove a Changeling from their Reaper King commander decks or whatever. And this one is like, oh no, this Scarecrow came to play.
Yes.
Yeah, I dig it. All
Very
right.
much so.
Cool. Sir, next up, speaking of cards that I think came to play, actually, I'm not sure on this one. The Tale of Tameo. Let's chat. So it's a saga. All right. It's a legendary saga at that for 2 and a blue. The first 3 chapters are all the same thing, which is mill 2 cards. If 2 cards that share a card type were milled this way, draw a card and repeat this process. And then the 4th chapter is exile any number of target instant, sorcery, and or Tameo Planeswalker cards from your graveyard. Copy them. You may cast any number of the copies. Period. So you would still have to pay the mana cost on them.
Yeah.
But how do we feel about this thing?
Well, I think this is one of those cards that either is super busted, and we have yet to find it out, or it's poo-poo garbage.
You're right.
And I don't know that there's an actual in-between. And
Hmm.
the reason I say that is because like I think a card like this does fine in like the current existing self-mill decks where like for example, and by self-mill I'm talking about like the Urborg, Lorbekoif, Soul of the
Souls are
Forgotten.
lost.
Souls of the
Yeah.
Lost, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like that type of a Sultai self-mill deck
Yeah.
where you want the
Leveraging founding the
creatures
third
in the
path and
yard.
yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And you have to do this mode on 1, 2, and 3. So like how much can we mill the yard and draw cards to find payoffs? But then that doesn't interact with the target instant sorcery or Tameo Planeswalker card part of the saga. So do you
Right.
only play this for modes 1, 2, 3?
I think you have to,
And
right? Like, I mean, mode 4 seems pretty lackluster. Yeah.
yeah.
I don't know.
And hey, you know, they probably tried to include Tameo Planeswalker on here for the sake of the card, right? We do have a Tameo that is in standard. No, we don't have a Tameo that's in standard currently.
Yeah, the one
It
from Neo
rotated.
just rotated. Yeah.
Yeah. So not playable unless Tameo makes a
Right.
future appearance somehow as Ghost Tameo. Hey yo.
They made Ghost Cameo, so they gave themselves the option. Yeah.
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 So
I don't
so
know.
maybe we see something. But I don't know. It for three there's a lot more you can do for 3 mana in standard.
Hmm.
So there has
Yeah.
to be some busted combo with this card
The one
eventually if
that
it doesn't exist now.
100%. The one that came to my mind is some kind of laboratory maniac combo with something like encroaching mycosynth that turns all your cards into artifacts. But the problem with that is you'll notice those chapters 1 through 3 aren't there's no May there. You must
Yeah.
mill the cards, and if you do, you must draw a card and repeat the process. So if you
Yeah.
don't have a laboratory maniac on the field as that's happening, you are screwed. So you're just gonna die to your own combo. You just flew too close to the sun, and that's
Yeah,
that.
because you have to draw the card, yeah.
Yeah. And so there are better ways to do that. And like that wouldn't work with Thassa's Oracle because as you're going through, like that's all one resolution as you're repeating the process. So there's no priority in there. So it's one of those where this looks like you should be able to do some really dumb combo nonsense with it, but like
Yeah.
I don't think that's easy to pull off. Like, so you'd have to do some kind of weird deck building thing where your deck is made up almost exclusively of lands or something, and
Yeah.
then but I don't know what that looks like, and I don't know what other components you put around it to make that valuable. You know, I haven't
Mhm.
figured that out yet, but this feels like a challenge. This is one of those I dare you build arounds
Yeah.
that you better believe I'm gonna noodle on this one because I feel like there's something here, and it just involves those first 3 chapters. I mean, being able to get, you know, if it's late in the game, being able to exile a Season of Weaving out of your out of your graveyard and fire it. Okay, cool. Like that's
Yeah.
neat, I guess. But like
And
if
the
you
other,
just want to aggressively mill yourself, I think there are just better options than this.
yeah,
Yeah.
the other thing that only really comes to my mind if you were trying to play it in like a reanimator deck,
Hmm.
um, you know, they did preview a card. It's a room. The name of it is escaping me at the moment, but I'll find it. It's like a room that has 6 and 2 black on one of the halves. It says when you unlock it, you get to reanimate all the creatures from your graveyard onto the battlefield. Um, maybe it's
Yes,
called
it's
Awakening Hall.
Awakening
Yeah,
Hall is the funeral room / Awakening Hall is
yeah,
is the one, yeah. Which
yeah. So this,
the funeral room for 3 whenever a creature you control dies. Yeah, but then the Awakening Hall's 8. So you can cast it for 8 out of your hand or unlock it once it's on the field. And yeah, when you unlock it, return all creature cards from your graveyard to the battlefield.
mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Yeah, so either like something like that or
Mhm.
the blue white helping hand deck in
Oh,
standard that
yeah.
has been
Okay.
making some rumblings might work well in that deck because then you get to fill up your graveyard and between that and Picklock Prankster and then play helping hand or that's a card that you could cast off of the last mode of this card, reanimating your
True.
haughty gens and stuff like
Mhm.
that.
Yeah,
Um,
maybe.
and that deck plays mostly like 1 mana cards, 1 mana and 2 mana
Mhm.
cards, instants and sorceries, to help boost your haughty gen and I think flow of knowledge or something like that to draw
Sure.
cards. Um, so yeah, I mean that could be a possibility for that deck. And then recast your reanimator spells when the last chapter pops
Yeah,
off.
Yeah, if you can get to the last mode and fire off like 2 helping hands and a couple card draw spells or something, that could be very strong. Yeah. Okay.
And this really brings like sort of the conversation to talk about the lack of graveyard hate that people are playing right now in Standard. And this is something that I had actually changed the Jeskai deck that I've been playing over the last couple weeks to include actual Rest in Peace. Like, Rest in Peace is in Standard, y'all. They put it in the Standard in the big score with OTJ. And that card costs 2 mana and says no on the graveyards. And it's going to actually be a very fair Magic card instead of unfair, because Duskmourn is a mostly enchantment-based set. And so there is tons of enchantment removal. So it's not like you can't deal with cards like Rest in Peace anymore.
Yeah.
But there has been a significant resurgence in Standard right now of like the Squirming Emergence decks. And you just can't beat that deck if you don't have Graveyard Hate. It's not possible. They will Squirming Emergence, they will Atraxa you, they will Jace and mill you out. Like, that's actually a legit win condition of 100%. That deck now. And so you cannot beat it unless you are exiling their yard somehow. And you need to be able to do it at instant speed or continuous effect like Rest in Peace provides. So given the nature of Duskmourn in having 1, lots of enchantments, 2, lots of reanimator strategies, and 3, cards like this, Graveyard Hate is a must.
It really is. Yeah, it really is. And if you're a graveyard enthusiast like me, just pack a lot of enchantment removal, because right now all the good graveyard hate they are enchantments, and so disenchants. And I know for a lot of my Golgari builds, I just run Haywire Might, often some number of them in the main, because it's critical. Those kind of effects, they can shut you down, so you need to be able to shut them down proactively. So be aware of that. Which creates a really interesting kind of arms race, like a little cat and mouse game, if you want to unlock the graveyard. There should be a fight there, because the graveyard is cracked and it needs some checks. It just is what it is. So anyway, this set definitely is all about the graveyard, and we're also getting a reprint of Leyline of the Void in here in the Leyline set cycle. So graveyard hate is definitely going to be present. Like, Void and Rest in Peace are both going to be standard legal. So we're going to see a lot of graveyard hate. So, but they seem to be juicing the graveyard strategies to make people still want to try them, even though they're going to be hitting some hate, which I think is interesting. Which actually dovetails.
Right now, the only color that doesn't really have enchantment hate right now that needs it is black. Black has everything else, but black doesn't really have any enchantment removal. And it brings me back to remembering Feed the Swarm. And I'm wondering if, like, whether it's in this set or another set, they end up giving it to them, because, they need to be able to deal with enchantments at some capacity. And if black is going to be the primary reanimate deck,
it's going to be pretty.
To deal with Rest in Peace and Leyline.
Well, it's going to be pretty clutch. I don't know if you remember, they a lot of people made a big stink when Wilds of Eldraine came out because of Shatter the Oath. Oh my goodness, but there's always Shatter the Oath. It's destroy target creature or enchantment, and you get a wicked roll. Yeah, but it's a sorcery for 5, so
mana.
It costs 5. Yes, I understand.
Turn 4 Shieldred and follow up with a 5 mana destroy target enchantment spell.
Yeah, like, if you're having to spend 5 mana to answer an enchantment, you're not gonna get there. Like, that's just dope art by Dominic Maher, though, because Dominic Maher never misses. But anyway, so so they've worked hard to put enchantment hate into Black's color identity, and now we don't really have a good playable one in Standard when they need it most. So we'll see if that changes, but for now. Fortunately, a lot of good reanimator strategies work best when you pair black with something else. There's a lot of Golgari stuff going out. I've seen Dimir tinkered with. Orzhov is also looking fantastic. And to that end, they actually gave us a new Orzhov reanimation spell. Rite of the Moth is a sorcery for 1 white, black, black. Return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield with a finality counter on it. And it has flashback for 3 white, white, black. So we have an Orzhov reanimation spell with flashback that can be cast for 4 mana. So this is where and appropriately enough, there's even a moth in the art, because I'm about to say you can just cue the meme. Is this Unburial Rites? It is what it is, right? And the answer is no. It's not Unburial Rights. It's going to play much differently than that. Unburial Rights is a very special reanimation piece that, there's only one Unburial Rights. But this is the closest we've seen in a hot minute. So I'm excited about this thing. How do you feel about it, Carla, before I
soliloquize? This isn't a clear indication of what card they want you to reanimate with this card. I don't know what else is, because literally Rite of the Moth referring to Valgavoth.
Right.
Which costs 9 mana. So they're like, here, why don't you somehow get Valgavoth in your yard during the first 3 turns of the game, and then you can cast this 4 mana Write Them Off, and bam, you've got this big 9/9 demon on turn 4 on your side of the battlefield. There's no way there's a better card that you could target with that, is there?
Of course not.
Let me introduce you to my friend Atraxa.
All right.
But, it's relevant because there are so many like just cool targets that you could do with that. But you have to commit to that piece, right? Of wanting to reanimate on turn 4. Like, yes, you could just put this in like a Mardu reanimate shell. There is a deck that's floating right now around that plays like Rakdos Joins Up and Coiling Rebirth, right? Those things are fair because they cost 5 mana. You can put cards like Trumpeting Carnosaur into the graveyard with its own triggered ability. Heck, this might be able to make the infamous Cruel Claw a better deck. Maybe. Because you can play the reanimate targets and the reanimator spells off of the Cruel Claw. Right? So you can build that type of a Mardu, graveyard shenanigan strategy with this card. Like, this just adds to that and lets you cast it again later in the event that something happens to the first cast of this card, or you have the ability to reanimate from your yard.
Or if you're doing self-mill and it finds its way there. Okay. Yeah. So
I think this is a fair spell. I don't want to say that this would be like an unfair reanimate spell for 4 mana. And the other thing is, Black already has many ways for you to discard your own cards between like Liliana of the Veil and Bitter Triumph to help you have a removal spell. And now here's a target for you to reanimate later, which is pretty cool. So I think this is very good for Standard.
Yeah, I dig it. I think it's beautifully done. I am on record repeatedly saying they'll never give us a good 4 mana reanimate spell, and I'm so jazzed to arguably be proven wrong on that. I think this is really cool. The casting cost, I think we need to call that out, because you mentioned a Mardu reanimate shell. You got to be very careful with your mana base if you're going to build that, though, because this does have the double black requirement. Like, that's not, and you have to have white. And I think it's notable because right now, a lot of the good ways to fill your graveyard, you have the black cards that you mentioned, which are very relevant and very strong in that regard. And, that's great. But a lot of the good, like, just discard spells are red right now. You have Highway Robber, you got Thrill of Possibility, Bitter Reunion, those kind of cards. And so, if you're just trying to fill your graveyard and just churn through some cards, red is a very powerful color for doing that specifically. So to give us a card that has 3 colored pips in its casting cost and none of them are red is that's a pretty significant cost if you're just trying to power reanimate. It's going to make your mana base really dicey. And I think that's interesting, because you also have things like Collector's Vault, which can help with that. But with Collector's Vault, you have to pay it on 2, and then you have to activate it on 3 if you're going to get any value out of it. So you're committing 2 turns to that approach. And if you're really hoping to hit this by turn 4, that's going to be tough. That's going to be tough to pull off. So it's so like, it makes me also think about cards like Charming Scoundrel. So if you're playing like a 3-color mana base, you can use that to discard, draw, or make treasure. Yep.
You also have Matsalanti the Great Door from Ixalan. That's just 3 mana, draw, discard card, and it's generic mana. Legendary, though, which is relevant. But it does enable you to discard whatever you want out of your hand and enable that turn 4 reanimate spell.
Yeah, looting every single turn is pretty decent. Yeah. Good stuff. Yeah, I don't know. I love this design. I just think it's great. Now, the other cost to it is the finality counter. So you're gonna be able to cheese something out on 4, which is great. But then if it dies, it's not coming back, no matter how many more reanimation spells you have. And I think that's really important. So reanimating something with a death trigger is kind of a waste. It's not going to quite get you there. And And it's not going to work as well, I think, in decks that are trying to really take advantage of ETBs, because you're only going to get it once. You know, like the ETB
Yes.
targets like Atrax and Atali are kind of at their best when you can double dip and triple dip them. You know, like that's really when things get stupid. And this is going to make that very difficult unless you also have some kind of blink package, but that's going to be taking cards away from the other strategy. It's going to be difficult to juggle and make work. And so I feel like this is like a classic reanimator in that the goal is to get something that is obscenely expensive fast. And like, that's what this is trying to do. And, you know, and yeah, if you can get Valgavoth with that just absolutely disgusting ward that it has, then it's probably going to be able to wreak havoc on your opponent for a turn or two. And that's going to be probably enough to close it out. So yeah, if you can hit the Moth with Rite of the Moth, you're gonna have a good day.
And that's got to be like your best target,
four,
though, right?
It probably
in
right?
that case, because of the ward, like it's got to be the best, because there's no way that the person who, you know, your opponent can't get lost this and sack 3 non-land permanents to make it go away forever. Or if they do, that's a pretty damn good 4-mana reanimator spell.
Oh, but even if they can, you're feeling fine.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. So yeah, actually, I mean, it's funny. I was not very high on Valgavoth, and I still, generally speaking, as long as Atrax is around, I'm going to second guess wanting to include Valgavoth as my reanimator target. But Rite of the Moth specifically has me kind of second guessing that. I definitely want to try it because that seems good. That seems pretty darn good. Yeah, you're going to see an uptick in use of Sheoldred's Edict if that happens. That card's going to the stock on that's going to go much higher, or Liliana.
Blot out from Aftermath.
Oh, yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Absolutely. Yeah, so good stuff.
Get your Liliana shape now if you can, y'all. I listen, we have said on this podcast, at least I have on this podcast multiple times, that Liliana is way better now in Bloomburrow standard than it was pre-rotation. And if you are worried about getting wrecked by reanimator cards, Liliana loves them. So, like, it gets rid of the one-trick pony thing. So it's really good against Valgavoth, really good against, you know, if your opponent is reanimating. I don't know, it's not really, like, fantastic against Atraxa, but it gets rid of the 7/7, even though your opponent draws 10 cards. But
it stops the clock for a second, but yeah.
Liliana, though, enables the reanimating to sort of, like, continue. You don't really want to +1 against the reanimation deck. But it's relevant. But it makes cards, like you said, Sheoldred's Edict, Blot Out, much more playable. The Golgari mid-range decks are already playing those cards. The Dimir mid-range decks are playing those cards. So I have to imagine that's going to be a stay.
It's just
as a counter to Valgavoth.
Yeah, so maybe the number of edicts increases a little bit. The number of cut downs maybe drops a little, you know, something like that. Yeah. Yep, I can see that. So it'll be interesting. But yeah, cool stuff. Interesting idea. So yeah, Rite of the Moth. Interesting design. I dig it. Cool. So we have a couple other ones that we want to chat about. We were talking about graveyard shenanigans. We have another piece of, you know, graveyard aggro nonsense in Undead Sprinter. This is a 2/2 zombie for black-red with trample and haste. You may cast Undead Sprinter from your graveyard if a non-zombie creature died this turn. And if you do, it enters with a +1/+1 counter on it.
10 out of 10, y'all. In terms of the spicy multicolored cards that are in the set. But the amount of like sweet mid-rangey aggressive cards, you know, like we said, at worst, this is a 2/2 trample haste for 2 mana. It is able to reanimate itself, or you can rather cast it from your yard, right? And when it returns, in most cases, it's going to return as the 3/3 with the counter on it. So 3/3 trample haste. This is like a nice upgrade to Tenacious Underdog that we saw in New Capenna, in my opinion. Granted, it doesn't draw you a card every time, which is relevant, but let's be honest, Black has enough card draw, as it is in plenty of other cards right now. So this is a nice, you know, the zombie creature type isn't really relevant at the moment, but the fact that you can put in a 3/3 trample haste from the yard, so if your opponent cut downs this the first time, they're not cutting it down the second time. And wasting removal spells like Go for the Throat on this is great because you just keep recasting it. So for me, this is a 10 out of 10 standard Rakdos mid-range or aggro playable card.
Absolutely. Well, and I love this too alongside cards like Forsaken Miner, that is a skeleton, not a zombie, which is a 2/2 for 1. So like the amount of non-zombies in very aggressive decks is very high right now. And so the number of times that you're going to be able to attack with open mana and just basically show your opponent like, okay, you can take this damage now. Yeah. But if you do block in a way that kills one of my things, I'm going to be adding 3 power to it next turn. So, like, is that a good use of these resources? Like, it puts the defending player in an interesting conundrum, especially if you have multiples in your graveyard. Like, if you have 2 of these, I'm letting that Forsaken Miner or whatever else you've got coming at me just hit me, because I'm not going to kill it. Because this is just going to be a lot of power. And you basically, they're not free mana-wise, but those are... you're getting access to cards that aren't in your hand, if you know, when you get that. And so you're not having to spend whatever cards you're sitting on, and you're still getting value. In aggressive decks, running out of cards is kind of the biggest challenge, and this helps mitigate that in really cool ways. Notably, it says that you can cast them your turn. If I'm not mistaken, that's still, it doesn't have flash, so it's only if a creature dies on your turn. So that's a factor, but that also... it helps kind of encourage the aggression. You want the need to be aggressive with this, because it's going to die if your other creatures die. Well, when are they going to die? If they get blocked in combat often, if they're small. So I don't know. It's just it seems very strong. I like
for
this.
Sure.
Yeah. No, the unending zombie aggro is going to be a thing, and I'm interested for the early access where we can try it out. It's gonna be fun.
I wonder if you could put it in some type of a Jund Roots deck, because those creatures aren't zombies either.
Correct.
Right? Like the Rubble Belt or the dog.
Oh, I don't think there's a single zombie in that deck. Yeah.
There's not any zombie, so even if your plant token dies from Roots, then you could recast this and trigger Roots and get another zombie again, and That's what that deck does, right?
Oh, 100%. And if you have some kind of sack outlet for is there some way that... Okay, I'm feeling like there's some kind of Agatha Soul Cauldron loop here that needs to happen with the plants. Plants, Undead Sprinter. We need some kind of sack outlet for the Sprinter. Yeah. Because if we can get a Voldaren Thrillseeker under a cauldron, the plants can all fling themselves. And then can we somehow get the Sprinter back in the graveyard after we've looped it out? I wonder.
Oh yeah, you can make enough mana off of the plant tokens tapping, and you can keep recasting the Sprinter.
Yeah, and I'm wondering about. There's got to be something there. Maybe we get.
We got this.
Maybe we go. Could we go 4 color with this and get Bartolome in here? I don't know.
Why not?
Why not? Let's get silly. We got those great lands for this. Let's go nuts. Anyway, I don't know. There's something there, but yeah, the combo nonsense aside, even just playing this fairly as a threat, it's just good. You get good rate. Dude's got trample. Yeah, it's a 2/2 for 2 at first. It's going to be a 3/3 for 2 later.
Yeah, this is an awesome card.
Yeah, I dig it. All right. And the last one that I wanted to talk about today is Reluctant Role Model, which actually shows off a new mechanic. I think we touched on it last week, Survival. Which, if you're not familiar, the idea is at the beginning of your second main phase, if this creature is tapped, you get a trigger. So the idea is if it attacked, was put in harm's way, and survived, you get a bonus. So, okay, neat. Yeah. And the Reluctant Role Model is a 2/2 for 1 and a white with Survival. At the beginning of your second main phase, if it is tapped, you put a flying lifelink or +1/+1 counter on it. And whenever a Reluctant Role Model or another creature you control dies, if it has a counter on it, put those counters on up to 1 target creature. So what if Warden of the Inner Sky was the Ozolith?
Well, Warden of the Inner Sky can become the Ozolith.
Yes.
But also, it makes me think of cards like Essence Channeler from Bloomburrow, the bat that says when you gain life, it gets +1/+1 counters. And so you get to just start moving counters around from creature to creature to creature to creature as much as you want here. Seems pretty nice.
Yeah.
I mean, aside from that type of deck, this certainly fits in any Convoke deck. I mean, granted, it might not be as good as, let's say, the 2-mana creature that produces another 1/1. But the fact that it says if it's tapped, put a flying, lifelink, or +1/+1 counter on it. I mean, giving your creature flying and lifelink is kind of more relevant than putting the +1/+1 counter on it. And then
Sure.
if this dies, you could put the flying, lifelink, or +1/+1 counter on your Night Errant of Eos.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, this seems like a very versatile card. That it can fit in multiple decks that are just playing white creatures on 2. Like,
Yeah. 100%.
I mean, its stat though, it is subject to a lot more removal than some of the other cards we've talked about tonight.
True.
Yep. For the simple fact that it starts as the 2/2, but in the moment that it survives and it becomes a 3/3, you get to start to avoid cut down, which is still one of the top removal spells in Standard. Like, being able to avoid that card is huge.
Absolutely. Well, and cut down's not going anywhere either. Like, I don't think we're going to see a decrease in play on that by a large scale, because it's just so effective at what it does.
Yeah.
No, I feel like that second paragraph on this is really impressive. Like, anytime you have an opportunity to move counters around after something dies, it's gonna be powerful. That's a lesson that we all learned back in 2004 with Mirrodin. Like Arcbog Ravager and all the modular homies taught us how good that is, and yeah, it still is. Well, and it's funny, like you mentioned Essence Channeler. If I'm not mistaken, Essence Channeler has its trigger to move its counters, but then the Reluctant Role Model would also trigger, and you would actually be able to move those counters to 2 separate things or double the amount going to something, which sounds unintuitive and not how it should work, but that is how it works. So, yeah, I feel like in the right kind of a shell, like you mentioned Convoke in vehicles are and Warden of the Inner Sky actually has an ability there where it would allow you to tap this without having to attack with it. And I feel like that's where you're going to see these survival creatures really shine, is if you can tap them through other means somehow. We don't quite have a Springleaf Drum in Standard at this moment, but I'm sure it's just a matter of time. We'll get another one. But, Convoke and vehicles are probably the first 2 things that come to mind. And this is one of those where, just getting a flying, the moment you get the flying counter or the lifelink counter, you just have a flying and lifelink counter now, unless your opponent exiles this. I think that seems really good. I like it. Yeah. So I feel like this one is asking you to do something, and it's kind of appropriate that it doesn't protect itself in any way and is just sort of squishy. Like, it is very soft to removal, but if it sticks around, you get a really significant benefit. So, and I like the fact that a +1/+1 counter is part of the mix, because you're right, you can prioritize it if you're going up against black to make sure that you get that get out of cut down range as fast as possible. But if you're not, and that's not the immediate concern, it does make sure that you can continue to get value off of that trigger even after you've got the 2 keyword counters. If it does go unchecked for 4 or 5 turns, you're going to be able to it's just going to be able to grow and snowball, which is great. Like, we need that. Our threats nowadays, they need to snowball if left unchecked. Like, they just have to. If they're not, if they don't, they're not going to get you there. So yeah, I think that gives you some hope. Yeah, it's interesting. So I think it's one of the better survival cards we've seen as of yet.
Yeah, most of them I think we've seen so far have primarily been like uncommon and commons, and very playable and limited from a limited perspective. This one, though, I think very much stands out as a very clear Standard playable card.
Yeah, I'm glad to agree. And it is a rare, so, they knew.
Yeah.
Rock on. Cool. And also that one has one of the cool art treatments where there are 2 different versions.
Oh,
Yeah, and so if you clip through them quickly, you get a little jump scare, which is kind of fun. Yeah, not quite. There are a couple of them where I did give myself a legitimate jump scare looking through the spoilers with I think it was a blue card from this set. Here, let me tee it up so I can give all of you fine folks watching the video the exact experience that I had. So I was looking through the spoilers and I saw this uncommon, Stay Hidden, Stay Silent. It's an aura for 2. It taps a thing. It is what it is. And the artwork shows a survivor, like what appears to be like behind a couch, kind of like cowering and like with their hand over their mouth, trying to like hold in a gasp. And then if you scroll quickly to the alternate art, there's this gigantic monster that is like looming over them. And like I literally was scrolling through the art quickly, and like it went just so for some reason the sequence just like clicked from one to the other, and this gigantic monster just popped into my face
Like,
on my browser. Like,
oh,
yeah,
hello.
and, like I'm looking at magic cards. I don't like a jump scare in the middle of my magic card spoiler search. What is this?
Meanwhile, it's just the person trying to reach you about your car's extended warranty.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Oh my goodness.
That's a jump scare just in itself, y'all.
It really is. Yeah. Yeah. Scam calls me. I have a whole anyway. Good stuff. But yeah, so Duskmourn, it's looking fun. There's a lot of stuff going on in this set, and the power level is very high.
Yeah.
I've heard some people
than Bloomborough.
Right. I've heard some people commenting that the power level looks like it's going to be one of the more juice sets in standard right now, and given everything we've seen, I think that's probably correct. I think that this is definitely going to make a splash in the standard meta, which is great. Because it has to.
And this week coming up, we're going to be getting some more spoilers to finish it off.
Yep, we're going to be polishing it off.
They haven't finished the whole set yet. I think there's something like, I don't know, 180 some cards out of 200 and some odd. You'll get like 40 or 50 that'll just get revealed through the card image gallery, like different commons and uncommons that they didn't do special like previews for. And then I think during the latter part of the week, they're finishing off the Bloomborough Commander deck spoilers. They have shown some of those, which have some sweet reprints in them, which I'm excited for. But I think that the Bloomborough Commander deck prices actually went up by like $5 a deck or something like this. Don't quote me on that. It depends on your local game store and what they're charging. But I'm pretty sure the semi-quiet MSRP price went up by $5 on each of the decks. So expect that when you go to buy your products.
Okay. Recently I've seen a lot of hype for precons. They seem to be very popular. So yeah, if there's a precon that catches your eye, do not hesitate. Go get it. Yep. All right. Hashtag not spawn, but no.
But where can you get those Commander precons though?
You can get those Commander precons and other seal products at magicjank.com. Fun fact. And of course your local game store. Definitely support your local game store. We're not trying to, we love them. But magicjank.com is an online marketplace where you can buy and sell Magic the Gathering product and gear. So definitely check them out too. And that would help support our show, our content that we're making and all that jazz. So it'd be really cool. Thank you. All right. But yeah, so with that, I don't have a question of the week at the moment. I didn't even think of that until just this moment.
Listen, there's so much going on this week.
There's so much going on. Yeah, we'll tackle that another time. So a lot of times we like to end the show with a fun kind of getting to know you question that's off topic, just for fun. But this week it's already been longer than we anticipated because spoilers, they are what they are. So
preview season, and we're used to it by now.
Exactly. So, Carlo, do you have anything coming up that you want to tell the people about before we head out? I know there is the early access. Not this upcoming week as you're listening, but the following week, Wednesday the 18th is when that starts.
Wednesday the 18th is the Magic the Gathering Arena streamer event. That is something that I believe starts at like 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time or something like that, and it rolls 24 hours this time. They're back to being 24 hours, which is beautiful. So that is where you feature the new Duskmourn cards a little bit early. Creators like Graham and myself, we get to play these cards early. Something that I like to do is always feature viewer brews as a part of the streamer events. I've been doing that since they invited me to them. So if you are interested in joining that bunch, what I do is I have a section of my Discord channel, and you can submit them via streamer event brews, and they will live forever on Moxfield. So once they're created, I make a little folder for them, so we can always go back and look at them and tune them when the set actually releases, which is pretty cool. Nice. And then we'll be playing those against other creators. So I know, Graham and I have battled many times on the.
This is true. Yes.
So that'll be fun. And then on the 19th, which is that Thursday, Magic the Gathering Online is going to be having a streamer event as well. Duskmourn Early Access. So same thing that we'll be doing on Arena. We'll be playing lots of Standard, maybe some drafts and stuff like that on Magic Online against other creators who are part of the MTGO Creator Program. So you'll get to see that, and that runs for a certain period of time on that Thursday. And then that weekend, Friday the 20th and Saturday the 21st, it is Duskmourn pre-release week. And I, for every pre-release, stream live from my local game store. That's the comic book store in Glassboro, New Jersey. And you get to see me open up the pre-release kits, build the decks with y'all, and then we play against our opponents. 3 rounds per event. There's 2 events on Friday, 3 events on Saturday. I play them all because I like my local game store, and I like to sit down and play the new sets. And playing limited lets me learn the new mechanics. So if you're like me, join, watch, have a good time. I might be opening up some collector booster packs. Who knows? Live on stream, and that's a good time to get my foils. So
fantastic.
It's gonna be a good time.
I love it. Well, and I mean, how many times have you been delightfully surprised at a pre-release by how strong a certain card is that like maybe flew under the radar at first? Like that's every time, right?
Every time there's always like some breakout card that you're like,
Mm-hmm.
that this is really going to be really good in standard, and it just destroys you in limited.
Mm-hmm.
We've had our limited discussions here with Headology,
Mm-hmm.
which I'm excited to hopefully have the episode for Duskmourn to gather their
Mm-hmm.
thoughts on this
I'm
limited
sure we will.
environment.
I'll do whatever I have to do to make that happen, because absolutely.
And I'm like, my opinions come from what I experienced at the pre-release. And so it'd be interesting to gather those thoughts, how there are like differings of opinions or what we see similarly that's happening between some of these like insane uncommons or absolutely like bomb rares. Like you win the game when you play this card.
Right.
It's definitely felt at the pre-release. I will say that I am very glad that Duskmourn does not have additional bonus sheets in them outside of the special guest, which we have every set anyway, to where there's these ridiculous non-standard cards being played in a standard limited set. I'm so glad that we've moved away from that, because the sets where that occurred was not a very good pre-release experience for folks. Now I think it's more balanced, and we get to really highlight the new cards, and yeah, so I'm excited for that.
So true. I hadn't stopped to appreciate that, but you're absolutely right. I mean, I'm remembering my Thunder Junction pre-release where, I went 2-1, and the one loss was because somebody hit me with a Contagion Engine. And it's like, well,
Right.
that card's literally not in the set, but like, sure. It's like, yeah. But yeah, no, I hadn't actually stopped to appreciate that we are just the special guest this time, because that is fantastic. That is a breath of fresh air for sure. So yeah, interesting stuff. Very cool. Yeah, a lot of fun stuff coming up. So yeah, I'm going to be doing all that stuff. Well, I'm not going to be doing the MTGO program, but Arena, I'm going to be going hard both days. I'm going to be one of those guys who is there deep into the day on Thursday until they kick me off. That is, I'm usually in mid-match when the server shut down. That is always the case. I would say I'm sorry, but Wizards has like no problem just pulling the plug, and that's fair. That's what they got to do. That's we understand how this goes, and that's all right. So anyway, but
also the other upcoming thing that we have is MagicCon Las Vegas.
Oh yeah,
that's coming up the end of October and is Duskmourn themed.
Yes.
Yeah, so Hamhawks and I are going to be sharing a meet and greet session on Sunday.
On Sunday,
it's at like 12:30 or something in Creator Central.
Yes, I
so if you want to stop by, we're going to have lots of goodies to hand out, some tokens and stickers, and probably some booster packs that they'll give us to give out to y'all. And
there's a good chance
if you want some sweet Duskmourn stuff, make sure to come by and say hello.
Heck yeah, we would love to see it. It's gonna be a ton of fun. And yeah, I don't want to speak for Carlo necessarily, but I know I'll be there all 3 days, like bright and early, and I will want to play a lot of games with a lot of people. So come find me.
Yes,
because
we'll have infinite commander decks.
So many commander decks. Yeah, I've actually got them all laid out. I'm trying to figure out which ones I'm taking with me. I have 12 built right now, and knowing me, I'll have 2 more built by then. So I just need to figure out, which ones to actually fit into the luggage. That's the challenge with traveling, but we'll figure it out. But yes, very cool. So thank you everybody for tuning in. We appreciate you. You're amazing. Links are down in the description of this, wherever you're listening. If you wouldn't mind dropping us a review on your podcast app of choice, or the like button, thumbs up, subscribe, all that fun stuff. If you're watching on the YouTube feed, we would definitely appreciate that. In the meantime, have a good time, everybody. We'll be back next week. Hopefully we'll see you on all the various places as we uncover more Duskmourn nonsense and share our thoughts. And also, we finally got a piggy bank, y'all. We got it.
Ooh.
I'm so excited. We don't need to go into a whole other. The card's funny. It's a bank. It's cool. Anyway.
True. It's true.
I know, right? Anyway, with that, thank you everybody for tuning in. We appreciate you. We'll catch you on the next one. Later.
Later.